The teacher of teachers, George Gurdjieff, used to tell a story where a wolf was having problems in catching sheep. Every time he tried to catch one, they would simply run away. So he wondered if there was anything he could do to prevent this. And eventually he approached a magician and asked the magician if he could help him in any way. The magician thought for a little while and said, well, if I hypnotize them to believe that they're lions and tigers and bears and wolves themselves, then they won't try to get away and you'll be able to catch them whenever you want. So he did this, and sure enough, when he tried to catch them, they didn't run away, and he was able to take them whenever he wanted. And it's been the same ever since. I once had an experience when I told a young man about how to live in the present moment and the obstacles to it, and that we were very rarely doing it, mostly in imagination of the past and the future. He appeared to understand and thought it was a wonderful idea, and then he said, we must tell a friend of his, an older friend, about this. I'm sure he would appreciate it. And then I told him, I don't think it's a good idea. He said, why not? I said, well, he's likely to get very angry and to say that it's all nonsense. He said, why would that be? Well, I said, he, being older, has already invested most of his life in other ways of being, and in order for him to accept the idea of being asleep in the moment, he would have to admit to himself that he had spent most of his life not doing this. And this would produce cognitive dissonance in him, and he would likely become very angry. But he convinced me to try anyway, so I did. And sure enough, the friend got quite angry and said it was nonsense and he didn't want to discuss it. And that was how that story ended. I've noticed that when I present the idea of being awake in the moment to different people, many of them have an internal gymnastics that somehow happens where they accept that it's a case, looking at the world and seeing how the world is and how it couldn't be the way it is if most of the people in it weren't asleep, sleepwalking through their day, doing all sorts of terrible things to one another. But they make this leap inside themselves where they project this state onto everyone else but themselves. And I remember when I first heard of the idea myself, I did exactly the same. I thought, oh, well, everyone else is doing this, but of course I'm not, because I've read books, I've studied, This isn't the case for me. I'm the exception. But then slowly, as I kept on looking, I realised I wasn't an exception at all, and that it was the exact same for me. And then, many years later, I realised that I had managed to turn it around a bit. I was able to sustain it. One of the reasons I was able to sustain it is that I put it as a priority over many other things in my life until such a time as I could have some of those things while being able to sustain presence. The most difficult thing one could ever try. Good luck with it. Bye-bye again.